He announced our separation before I even knew about it. The moment you realize your husband is a stranger is the moment you find out who you really are. I said those words to my therapist 3 months after the night that changed everything. But I should have said them to the 12 people sitting around that dinner table, watching my marriage implode in real time, while my husband stood there with a wine glass raised like he was toasting our destruction. Let me tell you exactly how it happened. How in 15 minutes, I went from being a devoted wife to a woman who finally found her backbone. How the worst betrayal of my life became the night I saved myself. My name is Penelope Blake, Penny to everyone who matters, and until 6 months ago I thought I was living a love story. Turns out I was just the supporting character in someone else's lie. The day started at 5:47 a.m. when I felt the bed shift. Through barely open eyes, I watched my husband Ethan slip out of our bedroom, phone already glued to his ear. His voice was hushed, urgent, the kind of whisper talking that happens when you don't want to be overheard. I know. Tonight's the night. Everything's going to change. My blood went cold, but I stayed perfectly still, pretending to sleep. In 10 years of marriage, I'd learned that Ethan never appreciated being questioned about his phone calls. Client emergencies, he'd always say. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under. I should have gotten up. Should have demanded to know who he was talking to at dawn. Should have asked what was changing tonight. Instead, I laid there like a coward, listening to the shower run, watching steam creep under the bathroom door, and telling myself I was being paranoid. By the time Ethan emerged, perfectly groomed in his expensive suit, I was sitting up in bed with coffee and my laptop, playing the role of the understanding wife who never asks uncomfortable questions. Big day ahead. I asked, keeping my voice light and supportive. He paused while knotting his tie, a silver one I'd bought him for our anniversary. You could say that. Don't forget about dinner tonight. But the dinner party at his brother's house. Nathan and his wife Jessica were hosting, celebrating Nathan's promotion to partner at the law firm. Extended family, close friends, the usual crowd of people who'd watched Ethan and me grow from college sweethearts to what everyone called the perfect couple. I picked up that bottle of wine Nathan loves, I said. The one from that vineyard in Sonoma. Good. Ethan was already checking his phone again. I might be running late from the office. Meet me there at 7. He kissed my forehead, a perfunctory peck that felt more like checking an item off his to-do list, and left me sitting in our king-sized bed, surrounded by Egyptian cotton sheets and the growing certainty that something was very, very wrong. I spent the day trying to shake the feeling. I had clients to call, marketing campaigns to review, a business that demanded my attention. I'd built my consulting firm from nothing, working 18-hour days while Ethan established his architecture practice. We were supposed to be a power couple, supporting each other's dreams. But lately success felt hollow. Ethan worked later and later. Our conversations had shrunk to logistics and pleasantries. We hadn't made love in 2 months, and when I'd mentioned it, he'd blamed stress and deadlines. Once this big project wraps up, he'd promised, then everything will get back to normal. I should have asked what normal looked like to him. Because apparently, his version of normal didn't include me. By 6:30 that evening I was standing in front of my closet, holding 2 dresses and trying to decide which one would make me feel more confident. The navy blue made me look professional and put together. The emerald green made me feel beautiful. Chose the green. Something told me I was going to need all the confidence I could get. Nathan and Jessica's house in the suburbs was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. Their Tudor-style home was the kind of place that screamed established family. Perfectly manicured lawn, expensive cars in the circular driveway, warm light spilling from every window. Penny! Jessica greeted me at the door with a hug that smelled like her signature vanilla perfume. You look gorgeous. That color is stunning on you. Thank you. Congratulations on Nathan's promotion. You must be so proud. Something flickered across Jessica's face. A look I couldn't quite interpret. Yes, well, it's been quite a year for changes. Before I could ask what she meant, she was leading me into the living room where the party was already in full swing. Nathan was holding court near the fireplace, regaling a small group with stories from the courtroom. Ethan's parents, Margaret and Robert, were sitting on the elegant sofa, looking distinguished and slightly uncomfortable in the way older people do at parties that run past their usual bedtime. "Where's Ethan?" I asked Jessica. "He called Nathan about an hour ago. Said he was running late from work but would be here soon." I mingled, making small talk with people I'd known for years. Ethan's college roommate Derek and his wife Amanda. Our neighbors from our first apartment, Tom and Linda. Jessica's sister Rachel with her new boyfriend. Everyone was dressed up, drinks flowing, laughter filling the elegant rooms. But I couldn't shake the feeling that people were looking at me strangely. Conversations seemed to pause when I approached. Smiles felt forced. When I walked into the kitchen to help Jessica with appetizers, I caught the tail end of what sounded like a serious discussion between her and Rachel. "Should have told her beforehand," Rachel was saying. "It's not our place," Jessica replied firmly. Then she noticed me and plastered on a bright smile. "Penny. Perfect timing. Can you help me carry these out?" "Of course. What were you two talking about?" "Oh, just boring family drama. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was actually, because Jessica and Rachel had always been close and never seemed to have drama. But I let it slide, carrying a tray of bacon-wrapped scallops into the dining room and trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. Ethan arrived at 7:45, looking harried and slightly out of breath. He kissed me on the cheek, again that perfunctory gesture, and immediately launched into apologies about traffic and last-minute client demands. "You work too hard," Margaret said, patting her son's arm. "You both do. When are you two going to slow down and give us some grandchildren?" It was a running joke in our family, but tonight it felt different. Ethan's face went pale, and he mumbled something about timing and career priorities. I noticed he didn't look at me when he said it. We were called to dinner at 8 o'clock. The dining room table was set with Jessica's best china, candles flickering, wine glasses gleaming. I found myself seated between Derek and Tom, with Ethan directly across from me. For the first time all evening, I had a clear view of my husband's face. He looked nervous. More than nervous. He looked like a man preparing for battle. We were halfway through the main course when Nathan stood up, wine glass in hand. As the guest of honor, everyone expected him to make a speech about his promotion, his gratitude for family and friends, the usual celebration stuff. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Nathan began. "It means the world to Jessica and me to have our favorite people gathered around our table." Murmurs of agreement, raised glasses, warm smiles all around. "Before I talk about my own news," Nathan continued, "my brother has something important he'd like to share with everyone." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Across the table, Ethan was standing up, his face pale but determined. This wasn't planned. At least, it wasn't planned with me. "Thank you, Nathan," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the obvious tension in his shoulders. "And thank you all for being such an important part of Penny's and my journey together." The past tense hit me like a physical blow. Penny's and my journey. Not our journey. Not our ongoing story. Our journey that was apparently over. As most of you know, Penny and I have been together for 12 years, married for 10 of them. We've built a life together, supported each other's careers, and created memories that I'll always treasure. Always treasure. Will always. Future tense about past memories. I felt like I was drowning in plain sight. However, Ethan continued, and that single word seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Sometimes life takes people in different directions. Sometimes what once worked perfectly doesn't work anymore. The silence was deafening. Every person at that table was staring at either Ethan or me, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, could feel sweat forming on my palms despite the fact that I was suddenly freezing cold. "After a lot of soul-searching and difficult conversations," Ethan said, "Penny and I have decided to separate." The world tilted. Penny and I have decided. We have decided. Difficult conversations. What conversations? When had we had difficult conversations about separating? When had we decided anything together? I was staring at my husband, this man I'd loved for 12 years, built a life with, shared dreams and fears and mundane Tuesday mornings with, and he was a complete stranger. It wasn't an easy decision, Ethan was saying, but we both feel it's the best thing for our individual growth and happiness moving forward. We both feel. Both. I didn't feel anything except shock and betrayal and a rage so pure it was almost blinding. We wanted to tell you all together as a family, Ethan continued, because you've been such a huge part of our story. We hope you'll continue to support us both as we figure out this new chapter. He raised his wine glass. To new beginnings and the courage to choose happiness. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. I could see Margaret's face crumpling in confusion and sadness. Could see Derek's mouth hanging open. Could see Jessica and Nathan exchanging glances that told me they'd known this was coming. Everyone was looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to nod along, to raise my glass, to smile graciously and confirm this devastating news that was apparently as much of a surprise to me as it was to them. Except it wasn't a surprise to everyone. Nathan knew. Jessica knew. Probably others knew too. I was the only one who hadn't known my marriage was over. That's when something inside me snapped. I didn't stand up slowly or dramatically. I shot to my feet like I'd been launched from a cannon, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. The wine glass in my hand was shaking, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I might throw it at my husband's head. Instead, I set it down very carefully on the white tablecloth and looked around the room at these faces I'd known for years. "I need to stop you right there," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Ethan's confident expression faltered. "Penny, let's not." "No." The word came out harder than I'd ever heard my own voice sound. "You don't get to speak right now. You've said quite enough." I could feel everyone's attention like a physical weight, but for the first time in years, I didn't care about making other people comfortable. I didn't care about being polite or accommodating or the perfect wife who never makes a scene. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the table like I was giving a presentation, "I have an announcement of my own." Ethan went completely white. "Penny, please don't." "What my husband just told you," I continued, ignoring his protests, "is complete bullshit." Margaret gasped. Someone, I think it was Linda, made a small sound of shock. But I was just getting started. Ethan just announced that we decided to separate. That we both feel it's best. That we had difficult conversations and made this choice together. I looked directly at my husband, who was standing there looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Here's what actually happened. This is the first I'm hearing about our separation. I found out my marriage was over at the same time as the rest of you. Apparently, my husband decided to divorce me and forgot to mention it to the one person it affects most." The room erupted in murmurs of confusion and shock. I could see people looking between Ethan and me, trying to process what they were hearing. "So let me tell you what really went on here tonight," I said, my confidence building with every word. "My husband made a unilateral decision to end our marriage. He planned this announcement. He coordinated with his brother and sister-in-law. He chose this moment, this audience, this setting. And he did it all without the basic courtesy of discussing it with his wife first." "That's not," Ethan started. "I'm not finished," I said, and the authority in my voice surprised even me. "You want to talk about difficult conversations? Let me tell you about the conversations we haven't been having." I looked around the table at these people who thought they knew us, who'd seen us as the golden couple, who'd probably spent years envying our seemingly perfect relationship. "We haven't been having conversations about the credit card bills that keep showing up for charges I didn't make," I said. "We haven't been having conversations about the mysterious phone calls at dawn and the texts that you hide from me." Ethan's face was cycling through emotions. Panic, guilt, anger, desperation. "We haven't been having conversations about why you're suddenly working until midnight every night, or why you volunteered for that 3-week business trip to Seattle when you've always hated traveling for work." I could see the pieces clicking into place for some people around the table. Margaret's expression was shifting from confusion to dawning horror. And we definitely haven't been having conversations about why you smell like perfume that isn't mine, or why there are receipts in your jacket pocket for restaurants we've never been to together. Penny, stop, Ethan said, his voice tight with warning. Stop what? Stop telling the truth. Stop embarrassing you in front of our family and friends. I laughed, and it came out sharp and bitter. You just announced our divorce at your brother's dinner party like it was the evening's entertainment, and I'm the one who should stop? I turned back to the table, where everyone was listening with the horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents. You want to know what else we haven't been talking about? Said. We haven't been talking about the woman who's been calling our house and hanging up when I answer. We haven't been talking about the weekend you claimed to be at a work conference in Portland, except I called your hotel and they'd never heard of you. Margaret made a sound like she was in physical pain. We haven't been talking about the fact that you withdrew $5,000 from our savings account last month without mentioning it to me, or that you've been meeting with a divorce lawyer. Yes, I found the business card in your briefcase. Ethan looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. And we definitely haven't been talking about your assistant Claire, who apparently has been doing a lot more than taking your meetings and organizing your calendar. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek was the first to break the silence. Ethan, what the hell, man? This is between Penny and me, Ethan said, but his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. No, I said firmly. You made it everyone's business when you decided to announce our separation here. You involved all these people in your lie, so now they get to hear the truth. I looked around the table at faces I'd known for years. People who'd been at our wedding, who'd celebrated anniversaries with us, who'd assumed they were coming to a simple dinner party and instead got front-row seats to the destruction of our marriage. You want to know the worst part? I continued, my voice gaining strength. It's not that he decided he didn't want to be married to me anymore. People fall out of love. Relationships end. I could have understood that if he'd been honest about it. I paused, letting my words sink in. The worst part is that he's been lying to all of us. Not just to me, to every single person in this room. He's been pretending to be a devoted husband while planning his escape. He's been accepting your congratulations on our marriage while meeting with divorce lawyers. He's been sitting at family dinners, letting his parents talk about grandchildren, knowing he was about to blow up their son's family. Margaret was crying openly now. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 5 minutes. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry you have to hear this, I said gently. You raised a son who's capable of great things. But right now, he's choosing to be a coward and a liar instead. Penny, Ethan said desperately. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months, I interrupted. I'm thinking clearly enough to realize that a man who would humiliate his wife in front of their loved ones isn't someone worth fighting for. I looked directly at Nathan and Jessica, who were both staring at their plates like they contained the secrets of the universe. And I'm thinking clearly enough to know that people who would help orchestrate this ambush aren't really my friends. Jessica looked up, tears in her eyes. Penny, we didn't want to. Didn't want to what? Didn't want to give me a heads up that my husband was planning to destroy my life in your dining room. Didn't want to suggest that maybe, just maybe, he should have this conversation with me privately first. We thought you knew, Nathan said weakly. You thought I knew. I laughed again, and this time it came out slightly hysterical. You thought I knew and just decided to show up here tonight to participate in my own public humiliation. I shook my head in disbelief. Or did you think I knew and was okay with it? That I was just going to sit here and smile and nod while my husband announced our divorce like he was announcing the dessert course? That's when Derek stood up, his face red with anger. Ethan, I've known you for 15 years, and this is the most chicken shit thing I've ever seen you do. Derek, you don't understand, Ethan started. I understand perfectly, Derek shot back. You're having an affair, and instead of being a man about it and talking to your wife, you decided to blindside her in front of everyone. Amanda stood up next, moving to my side. Penny, do you have somewhere to stay tonight? The simple kindness in her voice almost broke me. I have our apartment. He can find somewhere else to sleep. You can't just kick me out, Ethan protested. Watch me, I said calmly. The lease is in my name. I've been paying the rent for the past year while you've been saving money for our future. Turns out you've been saving money for your future. Singular. Tom stood up from his seat, shaking his head. Man, I thought I knew you. This is disgusting. One by one, the rest of the table began to rise. People were looking at Ethan like he was a stranger, like they were seeing him clearly for the first time. How long? Margaret asked, her voice broken. Mom, how long have you been cheating on your wife? Ethan looked around the room at faces that had once been friendly and supportive, and were now filled with disappointment and disgust. It's not what you think, he said desperately. How long? I repeated Margaret's question. Ethan's silence was answer enough. 6 months, I said, the pieces suddenly falling into place. It started 6 months ago, didn't it? Right around the time you started working late every night. Right around the time you stopped touching me. I looked at him with something approaching pity. You've been planning this for 6 months. Meeting with lawyers, moving money around, figuring out how to make your exit as clean as possible. And the whole time you've been coming home to me, eating the dinners I cooked, sleeping in the bed I made, pretending to be my husband. I never meant for it to happen, Ethan said, and for the first time that night, he sounded genuine. But it did happen. And instead of being honest about it, instead of giving me the respect of a real conversation, you decided to ambush me in front of our family. I gathered my purse and looked around the room one last time. Thank you all for showing me who my real friends are tonight. Some of you supported me when it mattered. Others. I looked pointedly at Nathan and Jessica. Well, now I know where everyone stands. I headed toward the door, but stopped before leaving the dining room. One more thing, I said, turning back to face the group. Ethan, you said you wanted to toast new beginnings and the courage to choose happiness. I picked up my wine glass from the table. You're absolutely right. Here's to new beginnings. Here's to finally seeing people clearly. Here's to discovering that I'm stronger than I ever knew. And here's to choosing happiness. Real happiness, not the fake version I've been settling for. I looked directly at Ethan. And here's to the courage to walk away from people who don't deserve us. I drained the wine glass and set it back on the table. Claire can have you, I said. But she should know that if he'll cheat with her, he'll cheat on her. And if he'll lie to his wife of 10 years, he'll lie to anyone. I turned to Margaret and Robert, who were holding each other and looking devastated. I love you both, and I hope we can stay in touch. You'll always be family to me, regardless of what your son chooses to do. To Derek and Amanda, thank you for having my back. It means more than you know. To Tom and Linda, you two have always been real friends, and I appreciate you standing up for what's right. To Nathan and Jessica, good luck explaining this to your children someday. And finally to Ethan, I'll have divorce papers drawn up by Monday. You can pick up your things while I'm at work. Leave your key on the kitchen counter. I walked out of that house with my head held high, my shoulders back, and my dignity intact. The next morning I woke up in my own bed, alone for the first time in 10 years, but not lonely. I felt lighter than I had in months, like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there. My phone was buzzing with messages. Margaret had texted to say she was ashamed of her son and would always consider me her daughter. Derek had sent a long message offering to help me move or anything else I needed. Even Linda had reached out to say that she'd suspected something was going on and regretted not saying anything earlier. There was nothing from Ethan, which didn't surprise me. He'd probably spent the night at Claire's apartment, spinning some story about how I'd overreacted and embarrassed him. But there was one message that made me smile. It was from Rachel, Jessica's sister. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Jessica made us all promise not to say anything, said it wasn't our place. But what he did was wrong and how you handled it was incredible. You're a warrior, Penny Blake. A warrior. I liked that, By noon, I'd contacted a lawyer. Not the same one Ethan had been secretly meeting with, but a woman named Catherine who specialized in cases involving adultery and financial deception. By 2 p.m., I'd changed our bank account passwords and moved half our joint savings into my own account. By 4 p.m., I'd changed the locks on our apartment. Ethan showed up at 6 p.m., standing outside the door with a suitcase and a bouquet of flowers that looked like a guilty afterthought. "Penny, please. Can we talk?" "We had 10 years to talk, Ethan. You chose not to. I made a mistake. I know that now. But we can work through this. You made a choice. Multiple choices over multiple months. And you made those choices without including me in the decision-making process. I love you." I looked at this man I'd once thought I'd spend my life with, this person who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my trust, and felt nothing. No love, no hate, no anger. Just a kind of sad emptiness where all those feelings used to live. "No, you don't," I said quietly. "You love the idea of me. You love having a wife who doesn't ask difficult questions and doesn't make demands and doesn't call you out on your lies. You love having someone to come home to after you've been with someone else." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you talk to me 6 months ago when you first realized you were unhappy? Why didn't you suggest counseling or a trial separation, or even just an honest conversation about where we stood?" He had no answer for that. "You chose the coward's way out," I continued. "You chose to have your cake and eat it too, right up until the moment you decided you were done with the cake. And then you chose to humiliate me in front of our family, rather than give me the dignity of a private conversation." I opened the door just wide enough to take the flowers from his hand. "These are beautiful," I said. "I'll put them on the table right next to the divorce papers." 6 months later, my life looked completely different. I'd thrown myself into my business with a passion I'd forgotten I had. Without the emotional drain of pretending my marriage was fine, I had energy for things that actually mattered. I landed 3 major clients in 2 months and hired an assistant to help manage the workload. I moved out of our old apartment, too many memories, and into a sleek downtown loft that was entirely my own. Modern furniture, bold artwork, a kitchen that actually got used for cooking instead of just reheating takeout. It was smaller than the place I'd shared with Ethan, but it felt bigger because every inch of it was chosen by me, for me. I started doing things I'd always wanted to try but had put off. I took a photography class and discovered I had a decent eye for composition. I joined a hiking group and made new friends who didn't know me as half of Ethan and Penny. I traveled to Ireland by myself and spent 2 weeks wandering through villages and castles, feeling more alive than I had in years. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts again. For years, I'd been second-guessing myself, dismissing my concerns as paranoia or jealousy. But I'd been right about the phone calls, right about the late nights, right about the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong in my marriage. I promised myself I'd never ignore that inner voice again. The divorce proceedings were exactly as messy as I'd expected. Ethan tried to play the victim, claiming I'd been emotionally abusive and unreasonable. His lawyer argued that I'd abandoned our marriage by changing the locks and refusing to reconcile. Catherine made short work of those arguments. The paper trail of his affair was extensive. Credit card receipts, hotel bookings, restaurant charges that corresponded with times he'd claimed to be working late. His secret meetings with a divorce lawyer proved premeditation. The financial irregularities showed a pattern of deception. "Your husband spent months planning this divorce," Catherine told me after one particularly brutal deposition. "He just wasn't planning to include you in the process." In the end, Ethan walked away with his car, his clothes, and his betrayal. I kept the apartment, the furniture, our savings, and most importantly, my self-respect. The personal aftermath was more complicated. Margaret and Robert divorced themselves from their son's choices, maintaining a relationship with me that was stronger than it had ever been. Derek and Amanda remained close friends. Tom and Linda became my hiking buddies. Nathan and Jessica sent a few awkward texts in the months after the dinner party, but we never really reconciled. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Ethan and Claire lasted 4 months after our divorce was finalized. According to the mutual friends who still kept me updated, she dumped him when she discovered he'd been texting other women. Apparently, leopards don't change their spots. He tried to contact me a few times. A letter, some emails, a couple of voicemails that I deleted without listening to. I'd said everything I needed to say that night at Nathan's dinner table. A year after that night, I was having coffee with Margaret when she told me something that put the final piece of the puzzle in place. "You know," she said, stirring cream into her cup, "Ethan called us last week." "Oh." "He wanted to know if we thought there was any chance you'd take him back." Apparently, Claire wasn't the only one. There have been others since her. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung a little to have my suspicions confirmed. "What did you tell him?" Margaret smiled, a smile that was part proud, part sad. "I told him that you'd found your worth, and it was a lot higher than he was capable of paying." That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my loft bathroom, brushing my teeth and thinking about how much had changed. The woman looking back at me was stronger, more confident, more at peace than the one who'd been ambushed at that dinner table. I thought about that moment when Ethan had raised his glass to new beginnings and the courage to choose happiness. He'd been right about new beginnings, just not in the way he'd intended. And he'd definitely been right about having the courage to choose happiness. I'd chosen it the moment I stood up and refused to let him rewrite our story. People ask me if I regret that night. If I wish I'd handled it differently, kept our private business private, taken the high road instead of calling him out publicly. The answer is no. Not for a single second. Because that night wasn't about our marriage. Our marriage was already over, killed by months of lies and betrayal and cowardice. That night was about my life. It was about refusing to be a silent partner in my own humiliation. It was about standing up for the truth when everyone else was willing to go along with a comfortable lie. It was about finding my voice after years of keeping quiet to keep the peace. Most importantly, it was about choosing myself for the first time in a decade. Ethan wanted me to be the gracious, accommodating wife who would smile and nod and make his betrayal easier for everyone to digest. He wanted me to be complicit in my own destruction. Instead, I became the woman I should have been all along. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is actually the best thing because it shows you who you really are when everything else gets stripped away. I discovered that I'm not the kind of person who accepts other people's versions of my story. I'm not the kind of person who stays quiet when staying quiet means letting lies win. And I'm definitely not the kind of person who needs someone else's permission to choose my own happiness. That dinner party was supposed to be the night my husband destroyed me. Instead, it became the night I saved myself. These days, when people ask me for relationship advice, and they do surprisingly often, I tell them this: trust your instincts. Always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. If someone's behavior doesn't match their words, believe the behavior. If you find yourself making excuses for someone else's treatment of you, stop making excuses and start making changes. And if someone tries to write the story of your life without including you in the process, take the pen back. Your life is yours to live. Your story is yours to tell. Your happiness is yours to choose. No one else gets to make those decisions for you, no matter how long you've been together, no matter how much history you share, no matter how much easier it would be for everyone else if you just went along with their version of events. The moment you find your voice, really find it, not just the polite version you use to avoid conflict, is the moment you find your power. And once you have that power, no one can take it away from you. Not your husband. Not your in-laws. Not your friends. Not anyone. That's the gift that terrible night gave me. It showed me that I'm stronger than I ever knew, braver than I ever imagined, and worth more than I ever believed. I wouldn't trade that knowledge for anything. Not even for the marriage I thought I wanted. Because the marriage I thought I wanted was built on lies and compromises and a version of myself that was too small for the life I deserved. The life I have now, messy and uncertain and entirely my own, is worth so much more than the perfect life I was pretending to live. Sometimes the worst betrayal is actually the greatest gift. Sometimes the end of everything you thought you wanted is the beginning of everything you actually need. And sometimes the moment your world falls apart is the moment you finally fall together. The moment you realize your husband is a stranger is the moment you find out who you really are. I found out I'm a warrior. And warriors don't stay down. They stand up, speak their truth, and fight for the life they deserve. Especially if they have to fight alone. I'm sitting in my favorite coffee shop downtown, laptop open, working on a proposal for a new client. The morning sun streams through the tall windows, and I can hear the gentle hum of conversation around me. It's peaceful in a way my old life never was. My phone buzzes with a text from Margaret. Dinner Sunday? I'm making that lasagna you love. I smile and text back. Wouldn't miss it. She's become more than a former mother-in-law. She's family in the truest sense. Someone who chose me not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That means everything. A woman at the table next to me is on the phone, and I can't help but overhear fragments of her conversation. He says he loves me, and I just have this feeling something's wrong. And maybe I'm being paranoid. I remember being that woman. I remember making excuses, dismissing instincts, choosing comfort over truth. When she hangs up, she looks frustrated and confused. Before I can second-guess myself, I lean over. Excuse me, I say gently. I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't help overhearing. Are you okay? She looks at me with tired eyes. Just relationship stuff. You know how it is. I do know how it is, I reply. And I've learned that when something feels wrong, it usually is. Trust your instincts. They're trying to protect you. She nods slowly. It's just so hard to know what to do. The hardest thing to do is often the right thing to do, I tell her. But you're stronger than you think. We all are. She thanks me and gathers her things to leave. As she walks away, I hope she remembers those words when she needs them most. I return to my laptop and continue writing. The proposal is for a company that helps women start their own businesses after major life transitions. Divorce, widowhood, empty nest syndrome. All the moments when women discover they need to rebuild their lives from scratch. It's work that matters to me now in a way my old projects never did. Because I know what it feels like to have your world crumble and realize you have to build a new one from nothing. The difference is, this time you get to choose every single brick. My phone rings. It's Derek. Hey, how's the warrior princess today? I laugh. It's become his nickname for me ever since that night. Living the dream. What's up? Amanda and I are having a barbecue this weekend. You should come. There's someone I want you to meet. Derek. I know. You're not ready. But he's a good guy, and he's been through his own relationship disaster. No pressure. Just come for the burgers and stay for the company. Consider it. 6 months ago, the idea of dating would have terrified me. But lately, I've been thinking that maybe I'm ready to let someone new into my carefully reconstructed life. Someone who deserves the woman I've become, not the woman I used to be. Okay, I hear myself saying. I'll come. Really? But if he's boring, I'm leaving early. Deal. After we hang up, I sit back in my chair and think about how different everything is now. A year ago, I was planning birthday dinners for a man who was planning to leave me. I was living someone else's version of my life, accepting someone else's definition of my worth. Now I'm the author of my own story. I've learned that happiness isn't something someone gives you. It's something you choose again and again, day after day. I've learned that love without respect is just pretty packaging around an empty box. I've learned that the opinion that matters most is the one you have of yourself. Most importantly, I've learned that rock bottom can be a solid foundation if you decide to build something new instead of trying to reconstruct what was broken. My phone buzzes again. This time it's a number I don't recognize, but the name makes my blood run cold. Ethan Blake. For a moment, I considered deleting it without reading. But curiosity wins. Penny, I know I have no right to contact you, but I heard through the grapevine about your business success. I wanted to say congratulations. You deserve it. I also wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I want anything from you, I know that ship has sailed. But because you deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty and respect and a partner who appreciated what he had. I was a fool to let you go. Hope you're happy. E. I read it twice, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, vindication, regret. Instead, I feel nothing. Not empty nothing, but peaceful nothing. The kind of nothing that comes when someone who used to have power over your emotions no longer does. I don't respond. There's nothing left to say to him. Instead, I close my laptop, gather my things, and head home to my beautiful loft with its city views and carefully chosen furniture and walls covered in photographs from my solo adventures. Tonight I'm making dinner for one. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Tomorrow, I'm meeting a potential new client who wants to rebuild her life after leaving an abusive marriage. This weekend I'm going to a barbecue where I might meet someone new. Or I might just enjoy the company of friends who chose to keep me in their lives. All of it is my choice. All of it is my life. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, that feels like enough. More than enough. Feels like everything. As I walk through the busy downtown streets, I pass a billboard advertising some romantic comedy with the tagline, "Find your happily ever after." I smile to myself. Already have. It just looks different than I thought it would. The woman who walked out of that dinner party a year ago was devastated, humiliated, and broken. But she was also brave, truthful, and unwilling to accept less than she deserved. That woman saved my life. And I honor her every day by living it fully, authentically, and entirely on my own terms. Some stories end with getting the guy. This one ends with getting myself back. And that, it turns out, was the love story I'd been waiting for all along. The moment you realize your husband is a stranger is the moment you find out who you really are. I found out I'm exactly who I was meant to be. Just took me a while to remember. Thank you for watching. If you want more videos like this, please like, subscribe and share.